I wanted to just welcome everyone. It is Friday. Friday, it's before Shabbat. And I am very honored to have Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, who I have the pleasure of knowing through Chabad at Binghamton, which is what we were just talking about. But really, that's not why, that's only part of why he's a special guy. That's why I know that he's a special person. But now, in his role, he works for the Jewish Federations of North America as a rabbinic scholar and as a public affairs advisor. And I think I mentioned this last time he was on. I've been watching on Facebook, and I haven't really seen it recently. So you'll have to tell me if it's just not popping up on my feed. But many Fridays or other days of the week, he was inspiring people through music, and I'm like, wait, I would love that here, and I like his style. And that's how we had him the first time. We said we have to have him on again. And one of the things that he just mentioned that we talked about then was he's actually very well known for an essay that he wrote called Color Erases, Color Paints. And as he just mentioned, he comes from a mixed race family, and that has taught him a lot of the good, the bad, and the things that we can work on with regard to race, diversity, but specifically I mentioned within the Jewish community. I don't talk about the broader community of the world and society, but I think if it's definitely something I could talk for ourselves, seeing as I grow and watch as other community organizations grow about inclusion and truly realizing where we haven't done well and where we can do better. And just to end off with one other point, Rabbi Rothstein was also listed as one of the Jewish Week's 36 under 36. So he's been recognized nationally as well in that regard of change and working with others and trying to bring about more inclusivity. So I'm going to pass that spotlight back on to Rabbi Rothstein, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Wow. It's so wild to like reflect on my life experiences and then also like through what you just shared, Rabbi Levi, and then also to be with you. We've known each other for over a decade, which is so nice. Like it's the journeys that we all have, and just friends who are with us today listening in, like, you know, as we come together over Zoom, right? The journeys, the stories of our lives, and the sometimes you know, this, it feels like we're on this path, and you know, we want to sometimes take a pause and a pit stop, but life is just it catches up with us. Sometimes we're chasing after it, sometimes it's chasing after us. So these journeys of life, I'm grateful that we have a little bit of time to like be reminded of Shabbos, of this time that has probably sustained humanity more than we even could imagine throughout history, throughout the last many thousands of years. And, you know, I don't know about you. I don't know how many Zooms you're on a day, or how you're spending your time when it comes to these wild computers in our pockets that we could literally look at the moon through my phone. You realize that, right? Like I could look at planet Earth live right now from a space station through my phone. I could like look up any recipe that has ever been, you know, it's wild and so the idea of just slowing down and being reminded of our humanity, how we connect. I wish we could do it more, honestly. So today, my hope, how I want to spend my time with you. I mean, one, I would be curious how you want to spend your time with me. But a few things that come up for me, especially based on your generous introductions, Rabbi Levi. I think like the journey of how I even became a rabbi is like very much rooted in my life experiences. Like maybe all of us, right, who we become is rooted in our context, but like my journey around like thinking about inclusion and identity and who belongs and who doesn't belong and insider and outsider, like yes, for sure, being a mixed race Jew, I feel that, you know, as a Black man with white skin, you know, I pass for white, how I look, but my life experience, yes, as an insider outsider in that way. But I would also add Muncie. Muncie, New York is a wild place to grow up. I don't know if you've heard of Muncie. If you heard of Muncie, I don't know if you're familiar. Yeah, so I mean, really beautiful. Like there's so much texture. There's a lot going on in Muncie, depending on what street you go down. You're in different parts of Europe. There's a lot of different kinds of Orthodox Jews in Muncie. It's one of the largest Orthodox Jewish communities in America and the world. My friends and I would say that another point around insider outsider, from when I look back at my peer group, most of us did not fit into the structures of the shul setting, the synagogue setting, the school setting, the camp setting. We were like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. We stuck together. We had community, but there was not a rabbi in sight. We were scoffers. We hung out in the woods. We hung out at the mobile gas stations. We hung out at the 7-Elevens. That's how I was raised. I could tell you crazy stories of just like Muncie, but to continue it, Binghamton was a turning point. I could tell you more stories in between that, but I studied in yeshiva for a year and a half before Binghamton. My rabbis from yeshiva in Israel, they said, don't go to Binghamton. It's secular university. How are you going to stay religious? You're not even going to get a minyan. You're not going to be able to keep up with your Jewish studies. And I felt called to Binghamton. I don't know why I went to Binghamton. I was, the journeys of life. But what I would say that happened at Binghamton is, for the first time in my life, as a mixed race Jew, and I talk to Jews around racial equity in the Jewish community, they say, honestly, I don't really know so many people of color. Like, I don't know Jews of color. The first time I met a Black person was in college, some would say, or the first time I met a Black person was here, right? Different people. For me, my version of that is that the first time I met a non-Orthodox Jew was in college. Before that, I had been exposed to different faith groups. My mom's side of the family are Buddhist, are Muslim, are Methodist. My family, but in terms of Judaism, and so I started I just felt I became alive around just the religious diversity of 21st century Judaism, and that kind of that experience in itself. But then organizing, bringing people, I think, to spirituality, to meaning, to context of their own journey and their story, being welcoming. And I staffed. This is the last thing I'll share, and then I would love to just sing a little bit, share some Torah on the weekly Torah portion. Also, we're in between Purim and Passover, so I want to talk a little bit on that and some songs. But I would say that when I was staffing birthright trips, that's what got me. Don't get me wrong, Chabad of Binghamton was awesome, and the experiences I had. We were the band, the Jewish band for Chabad of Binghamton called Facing East. We did a lot of their events, and we did other events. It was a lot of fun. I was one of the guys who made minyan on a weekday. I wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. Also a night owl. I'd like to stay up and party, but I was going to minyan, and I remember the Chabad of Binghamton truly grounded me. That's the truth. And but the experiences of birthright, seeing American Jewry like that, and to show up as a rabbi, to show up as a active and inspired by my religious experiences, not as a child. My religious experiences as a child were but in Israel, and then through finding my own voice, I was able to help create space, because I had so much Jewish baggage. I knew exactly what it felt like to feel like that you don't really relate or feel represented. I could tell you all day about that from different angles, and I realized that we could just create community, lechachila, as they say, before the fact. Let's build spaces that people could show up. And and I just remember these nights staying up with the participants, and they were going to be getting bar and bat mitzvah on the top of Masada, and they were looking for a Hebrew name, and I would sit with them with the Tanakh open. I'd be like, tell me a little bit about yourself. What kind of personality traits? And I would throw out names, and we would, before I knew it, I was helping people tap into their story, to who they were. And it wasn't about race per se. It wasn't around who they loved per se. It wasn't around who their abilities. When we talk about inclusivity, it was about do I get to show up as my whole self when as a Jewish person with all these other parts to who I am? Like, and that really is what, like, you know, after 7 birthright trips to Israel, that was like, okay, I think I'm going to go to rabbinical school. And so that kind of frame of thinking, I just want to say on the blessing of journeys, you know, we should be blessed to, like, you know, in the Torah, we say, Eila Maaseh B'nai Yisrael, these are the journeys of the Jewish people. And we record, we record a lot, right? We write a lot down. We reflect a lot. We remember a lot, right? Purim, the story of Esther, it's a letter. It's just a letter in a scroll. It's something we're supposed to reflect. It's written, a lot of, and just sometimes it's hard to slow down. So again, with the blessing of reflecting on our whole selves, the full journey. I don't know. How are you feeling about that as an idea as we go into Shabbos this week? Like holding your whole self, your whole journey, your whole story for a book in your hand and giving it a big hug.
I like it.
Slowing down.
It probably connects to the golden calf. You know, we keep it as part of our story. It's this week's Torah portion.
What do you mean?
I'm saying you gotta, I think we don't push away the negative part of our past. We build off of it.
I think it's not necessarily an only Jewish idea, but it is very much a concept that the Jewish tradition fully welcomes. We welcome the muddled, messy, right? And the rabbis call this week's Torah portion one of the most tragic events of Jewish history. I don't know if you were connecting to this week's Torah portion that way. And yet we speak about it as this moment of like what many modern folk would call restorative justice, right? Where Moshe, it's the whole Yom Kippur liturgy is the backdrop of the Yom Kippur High Holiday liturgy is this week's Torah portion, which includes the whole mess of being human and falling short and asking if I could just still show up with my wholeness, with all of my imperfections, with all. So, okay, so let's start with Avi. I see that you put in the chat, we learn, and then I see Hebrew letters.
Baruch Hashem, that's what he's put in for.
So Avi, are you saying that we learn from this week's Torah portion also about Baruch Hashem, about blessing God, or you're saying, tell us more. What did you mean by that? Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, is that? Okay, got it. Avi, thank you for that. So just even saying this idea, one thing that I'm hearing from what you're saying, learning from the past. Yeah. Yes, it's like, and it's, I think like it's a struggle. I think Shabbos, by the way, is supposed to help us with this. 7, the number 7. When you think of 7 in Judaism, I don't know what comes up for you, but what Avi just shared is a part of the Torah of 7 in Judaism. There's so many 7s to point to, but this idea of a wholeness, of a cycle, of a coming back to. In fact, this Rosh Hashanah begins the sabbatical year, the Shemitah year, and it's really about almost it's the ultimate equalizer, to go back, to relearn, to undo, to start over. Shabbos, right? Like, by the way, and for who? Everyone. That's the biggest thing on 7. 7 is about the world. It's about everyone, right? And it's like, and that's why if you notice in the Kiddush, when we raise our glass tomorrow, we say Ata uvincha uvitecha avdecha v'amatcha v'emtecha v'gercha Hashem. Everyone. everyone, 7. And so to learn from the past, to look back, and to thank Hashem, sometimes, by the way, it's a challenging thing to do when you hold your book, when you hold your story. You know, it's funny, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and after this, let's sing a little bit. Renegades podcast. It's a new podcast with Bruce Springsteen and Barack Obama. Did you hear about this podcast? It's a new podcast. Someone else brought it up to me this week, so I just listened to the first episode, and it's basically about, you know, 2 like huge superstar, star power celebrity voices, a president of the United States and like a president of like American rock, like let's say, like Bruce Springsteen and these 2 people, and they're reflecting, they're a decade apart. I think Obama's in his 60s and Bruce is in his 70s, and they're talking about how their experiences are totally different as a Black person, as a white person, but there's similarities. And one of the things that Obama was saying about Black people in America and African Americans that I think is also true very much broadly around the Jewish community is that the suffering and the struggle has prepared us to serve in different ways. In a world of suffering, we unfortunately have muscles from our legacies. And so when we hold our book, to say Baruch Hashem, to look back at the past and to learn and say, wow, like this is still a part of me, you know, and it's a part that has brought me, you know, again, life is hard, making sense of everything. We're not going to figure it all out today, but that idea is very powerful. So let's call some shalom into the room. And if you wouldn't mind using the chat, what are some things that you're like, we need some shalom? Personal, communal, national, global. What comes up for you? Oh, shalom. Shalom. Let there be peace. Also, the word shalom, like what does shalom even mean? Oh, shalom. Is it hello? Is it goodbye? Is it peace? Is it shalom? Is it wholeness? Is it l'shalem to pay? Oh, shalom. Or to complete shalom. Oh, let there be peace. You know, we start Shabbos. What's one of the ways in which we usher in the Shabbat Queen? We say, Bo'wi b'shalom, ateres bala, gavalam b'simcha, u'b'tzala, toch emuneh atzegula, bo'im kala, bo'im kala. We welcome in the Shabbos Queen. We turn around and we leave and we say, Bo'im b'shalom. Please join us. And when you join us, it should be with shalom, with peace. Harmony is a great translation, I think, for shalom, actually. Because the rabbis actually say that shalom is mechabre trei hafachim, joining together 2 opposites. It's conflict resolution. Shalom bayit, it's 2 people. Yotzer or uvore choshech, oseh shalom. Light, darkness, and peace. Shalom is not actually just about like, leave me alone. I need some shalom of mind. Shalom is about harmony. So it's amazing that we even say, Bo'im Shalom. The 6 days meets Shabbos. We're like, that's Shabbat Shalom. I want to move, I want to do all these things, but I'm just going to slow down. And that's also a form of Shalom. So, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Ashares, right? The Shalom theme is totally present throughout Shabbos. Melech Malchei HaMalachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Ashares, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei HaMalachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. I think there's one more. You know, like, so that's like what we work towards for Shabbos in a way. We work towards this like integration to like restore ourselves. You know, the 6 days, what does the 6 days do? For Shemitah, what do the 6 years do when you're in a free market and we're not necessarily thinking about all the people in need, or the land itself, when the land itself doesn't have a Shabbos? Like, what does that mean? You know, and we slow down. And it's, by the way, we do it on cycles of sevens. We know that we're really just about to enter. Passover begins a 7-week cycle from Passover to Shavuot, right? And there are many cycles of 7 weeks. It's not just that. And I don't want to misspeak, but there's holidays, if you look in the calendar cycle, like from Rosh Chodesh Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, to the end of the holidays is 7 full weeks. It's another 7. There's other 7 cycles that if you just keep looking, it's there. And the Torah portions we just are in the middle of, sandwiched right now, are about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, right? And even that in its formations, the Beit Moed, the Mishkan, in terms of who was the guardians of the sevens. Because if 7 is about a relationship and a parameter, it's about a circle, it's about containers. Who are the guardians of the sacred, of the holiness of 7? Who reminded people to live in the 7? It was the Kohanim, it was the priests, it was the priestly folks. The prophetic people lived in the week. They're in the 6 days. The agitation of the week, of the pushing, that's the prophetic, and we should live with that. But the priestly is really Shabbos. It's this time of bringing in the shalom. It acknowledges all that surrounds us. It does. It doesn't say goodbye to all that surrounds us. It just says that we should try to fuse, integrate, shalom, harmony. Anybody want to share? What comes to heart? What comes to mind from anything that I'm sharing with you so far? And we'll sing some more songs together. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Any reactions to your experience with Shabbos and also Shabbat, and also these days, like in this world, in this today? How are you feeling?
Don't be shy. That was 2 others to unmute their mic. Stan, what are you thinking?
You could also use the chat if you'd like, whatever feels right.
Did we get anyone?
Even just the pause to think about it, you know?
We've got in the chat.
Yes, thank you for this. I feel safer as the hour of Shabbos comes closer. You know, I also think all social movements for change need Shabbos. I also think that our work, our relationships even, right? They say shalom bias, but there's also shalom ba bias. Like it's like shalom in the house, but also leaving the house, right? There's a relationship that of Shabbos that is about sacredness, about, right? The priestly, again, is private and to an extent. So the getting closer. Other reactions? Let's just keep thinking about it. It's really like, I don't know if you've maybe heard of the expression, more than the Jews have kept Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jews. Have you heard this before? Achad ha'am. I think it's a 20th century, 19th century line. You know, and there's all these like pop culture, like mindfulness, you know, unplug. Today's National Unplug Day, by the way, if you Google it. It's like, you know, it's like Shabbos. But I was like, wait, is National Unplug Day like 52 times a year? Or is it just because, you know?
And here we are plugged in.
We're like, that's the other thing, right? Oh my gosh, how plugged in we've been this generation is too plugged in? Question mark? I don't know. Yeah, Shabbos, the movements of Shabbos is really, I think it's a reminder, the reminder of rest. So anyway, let's sing another song. This song was written by A.B. Rottenberg. He's honestly one of the living prodigies of Jewish music, I think. And why do I say he's maybe you could call him prolific or prodigious, but like he's literally written, I don't know, hundreds of songs that at least within the Jewish traditionalist world, people have sung his songs and they've hit a chord, and he's still very much writing, very much unique kind of style. It goes like this, maybe. The sun is going down, it's shining through the trees. Another week's gone by, become a memory. So throw away your hammer, there's nothing left to do. Go on home and find the gift, it's waiting there for you. Oh, it's time to sing a Shabbos, 'cause all your work is done. Gonna spend the day together with the Holy One. Say a special blessing on a cup that's filled with wine, like we choose for. Yeah, humans with their creator. It's a very special sign. Your candles will be burning, they'll fill your home with light, singing songs of Shabbos so well into the night. So throw away your hammer, there's nothing left to do. Go on home and find the gift that's waiting there for you. Oh, it's time to say good Shabbos, good Shabbos. By the way, the first time I heard this song, I was with like 300 teenagers at an NCSY weekend retreat, and the rabbi was playing this song, and when it got to the chorus, oh, it's time to say good Shabbos. All of the kids, like they were all clued in. I wasn't clued in. I was like new. But they were like, time to say good Shabbos. Good Shabbos! If you could picture a whole room, just hundreds of teens. Cause all your work is done. Gonna spend the day together with the Holy One. Say a special blessing on a cup filled with wine. And then they would all say, L'chaim! Man and his creator. It's a very, 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 very special time. I don't know. I'm seeing more in the chat. Let's check this out. I like the rituals of Shabbat. Lighting candles, blessings. My candlestick holders belong to my great grandma. That connects me to my past. Oh, I love that. My candlestick holders belong to my great grandma and connects me to my past. Yeah. You know, also the light, like the light of Shabbos. Do you think it's the same light of your great grandma? You know, like that light, the candlesticks might be different. You buy a candlestick here, candlestick there, but when we say Le'adlik ner shel Shabbat, is that like a light that just like, you know, if we now know there's Mars and there's beyond Mars, but if you could imagine like the Hogwarts meets space, just like Le'adlik ner shel Shabbos, and then the this light comes into your candles. Is that the same light that our ancestors looked at, the light of Shabbat? A healing presence. I mean, listen, you say a blessing, we blessing is meant to manifest something. So are we bringing it? Fulfilling the mitzvah of Shabbat. It's another one. Awake my soul. I don't know what awakes your soul. What gives you energy? First and foremost, our breath, neshama and nishma. Breath in Hebrew, nishma, is also the word for neshama, soul. Awake my soul, awake my soul. Awake. Yeah. So we should be blessed to have that bracha in our lives. This beautiful Shabbos coming up. And you know, before we close with a few more songs, I just thought I would pause here. Maybe we could have a little bit of a conversation together about really picking up off of what David shared, but speaking about our past, our legacies, our individual stories that we have from our ancestors, our collective stories, how they differ, how they're the same, our stories, and especially before Passover, in between Purim and Pesach, these days, we're either like, you know, still at the end of Purim or at the Erev Pesach, like however you want to, maybe a little bit of both, like the energy of Purim, of Adar, of this time of deconstructing or paradigm shifting from what we think we know what we thought we knew, that's Adar, to the not knowing of Adar, into the light of Nisan, into this clarity, into the spring, a flourishing, a renewal, a freedom story, a day of complete change and shift, radical shift. To an era of equity and justice, which we see Shavuot is really about. The Torah is really a symbol of equity, making sure that people have what they need. If you're like, what's equity? Equity is really, equality is everyone gets the same thing. Equity is, yeah, it's not enough to say everyone gets the same thing because everyone needs something different, right? I'm not going to give you my shoe size because I wear a 12 and a half shoe. So equality would be giving you the same shoes. Equity would be giving you different shoes. And really Pesach is about constructing the benchmarks, the Seder, the steps along the way to building towards that. So it's really a reflection. And I think our holiday calendars that we're in, but also the generation we're living in. As we reflected on so far from Shabbos, and the Shemitah and Sevens. For me personally, when I think about this time of year, when I think about the fact that we're coming up almost on Pesach in just 3 weeks from today, I think, is the Passover Seder. I'm reminded of just like really reflecting on kind of our ability to look back, to learn, to understand, and to integrate, and then to try to find a way to move forward. So in that way, I think it's really powerful. It's really powerful that we could come together during this season, because Pesach is about renewal. It's a Rosh Hashanah. It's a fresh start. It's actually what they say that Nisan, this month that is starting in just another week or so, is the first month of the calendar cycle. The Torah does. Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana. It's the first of all the months. So this idea of just looking back and how we look and move forward, this idea of looking at the story of Esther and Mordechai, and then a month later being at a Seder and imagining our future together, really sits with me. Something that I'm thinking about now. And I hope that we could really, again, going back to the fullness of our stories, like we started with at the beginning, being able to hold our whole selves. L'chaim, l'chaim. Should we sing more? What are you feeling? Any song requests out there? What are the songs that people are most acquainted to for Shabbos that they would love to get a little bit going in our Zoom room together? Rabbi Levi,
Ellen, I see you've got something. What are you typing? You could just unmute and request. You're still... Maybe if you haven't been to a service recently and you want to hear a song that you would hear traditionally on Shabbat or at a service.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey.
Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom.
Hey. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat.
Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
I wonder who wrote that. That one's next level, you know. That's a messianic kind of song. We'll sing it at Mashiach, you know, when all of the Jews come and unite. We're all standing together under one canopy, and we're doing some call and responses. That's going to be one of them, you know. Shabbat, Shalom, love it. Thank you for that. Thank you, Ellen.
I taught it to my students.
Yeah. When I was working in a school setting, we would do, every Friday morning, we would do a program for the lower school called Nosh, Nash stands for, it's an acronym, it stands for Nigune Shabbat, songs of Shabbat. And we would do the Shabbat Shalom, hey, mostly to get 200 kids quiet. That would be the primary function of our, when we would do the Shabbat, like we would be like ready to start, we would just go Shabbat Shalom, and all the kids would go, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat. Okay, and then we would start. But another one we would do to get everyone going, which was similar, but it would have the opposite effect. We would rile them up. Is we would say Shabbat Shalom, and all the kids would, the response would be woo. So it goes like, it goes Shabbat Shalom, woo, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, Shabbat Shalom, and everyone, the hands, woo, Shabbat Shalom, Mevorach, Shabbat Shalom, yes, Shabbat Shalom, Mevorach, Shabbat Shalom. So that was one that we would sing. I love it. So I want to tell you a story. Oh, I see another teaching in the chat. To fill in too reminds me of my cell phone and the charger cable. Nice. As to fill in charges me. I love that, Avi. Whoa, to like plug in. Yeah, it's amazing. It brings me back to what I was saying before about the candles, the lights of Shabbos candles. Like, are they really plugged into something much higher? When I make a blessing, what am I really, like, what's that reservoir that I'm pulling from? If I'm manifesting, I'm pulling, you know, so charging and charging in. So I want to sing one more song for you. That's one of my favorites. But before I do, just thought I would share a story. It's a story that I think about usually right around Pesach, but I think it has different kind of relevance this year. You know, in general, when we think about life, we should often cautiously remember that we don't always know what's going on in someone's life. That's like a rule, right? Like if we have like the right etiquette, we recognize that people have an inner world. And the rabbis actually, we have suggestions toward this, right? Have they done l'chol adam l'chafsus, right? That we should really remember that we don't see everything, we don't know everything. And with the pandemic, all the more so, right? Everyone has their own orbit, their own experience, and that sometimes we're looking to find communal hope, but the individual experience, you know, we meet a tension point because it's saying, well, that's really not how I'm feeling. And the individual versus the collective, I think, is a very real struggle always. But I think this year we're being asked to kind of reshape, reflect, relook, respect the fact that we're not one necessarily one person with one thought, one heart, one being. We are, but we're also, there's achdut and achidut. There's unity, but not uniformity, right? We have diverse experiences of life. And yet, what do I do on Pesach? I try from where I'm seated, and each of our kadishes and orchatzes are different, right? I might be saying them, but we're actually encouraged to say our own kiddush throughout the entire Seder. We're even encouraged to raise our voice. It's a mitzvah to speak, to like literally speak. It's encouraged, and not only beyond speaking, to communicate in any form, and the rabbis even say according to your ability, however way you can tap in is a part of the night. And it's very individualistic, and yet we're doing it at a table. And this year we know is not a year maybe of the biggest table. but we do this together. And I think one of the stories that I reflect on, it's a Hasidic tale that is a reminder of like the courage, the audacity and courage that we need to pick ourselves up and to believe in ourselves after we've fallen, or to believe in others after they've fallen. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And Pesach it's a freedom story. It's rising up from pharaohs, from hardship, from being struck, from being held back, mekotzer ruach, from being so stressed out that you could barely breathe, God forbid, or if you're in bad health, God forbid. And so the story goes that there was once a chassid, I don't know where you would place this story. For me, I place it in the 18th century. And fill in the blanks. We could put it in the 21st century version if you'd like. But the story, as I've heard it, is a chassid. He was trying to leave his town. He, she, they, trying to leave the town. And by the town gates, there were soldiers that wouldn't necessarily let the Jews just come and go unless it was specific to go from one town to another. So this chassid gets to the door and asks, and the guard says, "Where are you going?" He says, "Oh, you didn't hear? Like, yeah, there's a Jewish holiday this week, and I'm just going to see the Rebbe. I'm going to see the rabbi in the city." And the guard says, "Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, sure, happy holidays," kind of thing. And a day later, the guard's going through the town square, and he sees the day that this chassid said was a holiday. He sees these Jews in the town square playing backgammon and trading and working. And he pauses them and says, "What are you doing? Like, it's your holiday. Why are you working?" And the Jew said, "Holiday? It's Tuesday. Holiday? What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well," and then he was getting ready. He gets on his horse or in his car or whatever, and he gets ready to go to chase down this chassid. And quickly, the two Jews in the square, in the marketplace, say, "Oh, wait, what holiday? Slow down before you go. What holiday did you say this chassid said it was?" And in perfect Hebrew, the response of the guard was Yom Pletatenu, and he says, and the Jews say Yom Pletatenu, and they're like, "What?" And Yom Pletatenu means the day of our escape. And the Jews said, to the guards, they said, "Oh, yeah. That's a holiday. That's a holiday. Every Jew needs to choose for themselves what day is their Yom Pletatenu." So it is, yeah, that's a holiday. And that's kind of how the Hasidic story lands, right? Because it's like, and I tell that sometimes when I leave Seders, because it's like, here I have a gajillion details of things I can do to like try to tap into freedom. And yet if I'm not there, I'm not there. Like, I'm just not there, right? And yet I'm being compelled, right? The rabbis, our traditions, our legacies, our ancestors, our parents' voices, our grandparents' voices, whoever's voices, our children's voices, our grandchildren's voices, they're in our head saying like, I'm here, but am I here? And so this idea of from where we are seated to try to find our strength, to escape or to leave that Yetziat Mitzrayim, to leave the narrowness. That's what that means. It literally. That's what when we say of leaving Egypt, Mitzrayim, leaving that. So that takes our own that courage from within. And where do we get that strength? Like truly, where do we get that strength? On a practical level, it's from support from others, I think. But on a spiritual level, we have it. We already have it. It's inside us. The neshama, the breath that we have. Shabbos, they say, is a makor habracha, time to be reminded of the blessings that we have in our lives. And so for me, as we sign off for today, there's one last song. It's based on a text from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And Naomi Shemer, she's the one who wrote a melody, and she changes the words slightly, but it's predominantly based on a text from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I think it's just a reminder that we each have our own strength. Even every blade of grass has its own strength, has its own song, he says, and it's their unique voice that they bring. And not only is this song a song for plants, it's for us as people. And how beautiful it is when we're able to find our voice. How beautiful it is when we're able to tap into an energy of Yom Pletatenu, to awaken our hearts. This is some of the language. Mit orer halev umishtokek. Such beautiful language to lift up our hearts, to shake ourselves out, to bring ourselves to a higher level. So I'll sing a little bit. It's one of my favorite, honestly, this melody. יש לו ניגון מיוחד משלו, הדע לך שכל עשב ועשב, יש לו שירה מיוחדת משלו, ובשירת העשבים נעשה ניגון של רועה. Final blessing for each of us about Shalom, to integrate all those parts of who we are. The Shalom Aleichem, the plurality, not Alecha or Alayich, Aleichem, to all the parts of who you are. To bring that Shalom Aleichem to all the parts of who we are. We should be blessed to have a Shabbos, a time of seven, a time of integration, a time of remembering kind of the thread of where we come from and who's in front of us, how we are also ancestors. We're ancestors to our descendants, so we should be blessed. We should be blessed to lift up our voice from wherever we're seated, to find our day of escaping from some of the hardships that we've experienced this year, and enter into building more tools for gaining shalom in our lives. So good Shabbos. It's good to be here with you. L'chaim, l'chaim. Rabbi Levi, I don't know if there's other things we should cover today, but I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you. I think one day I want to bring you back on to talk about your essay and, of course, what's changed since you've written it.
I would love to. I mean, yeah, if you have any questions that you want to ask specifically, like that question of what's changed since I wrote the essay, I think.
And just for everyone who did not hear earlier, 30, you might need to give a little bit of background on it, but we'll share it again. It was in our emails. But if we bring you back on for that, that would be something that they definitely have to be well read on.
Yeah.
36, say the title again, 36.
Oh, it's Color Erases, Color Paints.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, listen, like what I would say is that this is like, you know, some of the kits are the shorter version, but I think that, you know, being a mixed race Jew, there's a few things that I think we need to remember. One is that Jews have always been multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, if not always, for the last 2,500 years. There are Jews in over 70 countries worldwide. There are Jews in over 70 countries worldwide. They're not all European countries. We're from everywhere. We're not a race. We're not. We're not an ethnicity. We're not a culture. We're all of those things and none of those things. We're a people of monotheism and the divine image. And any frame for that. Race, Judaism confuses race and racial constructs. We break the rules. People want to call us things like ethnicities and races. We've even decided in different stages in history to go by race and ethnicity. But in our generation, what's happened? The last 50, 60, 70 years, American Jewry specifically, we've seen a phenomenon where we've seen a predominant European Jewish American community of 5.5 million strong start to, you know, some use the word assimilate, others say fall in love. I don't know, whatever you want to say, but it happens in many forms. Love is not just through you know, partners, but also for children, right? So the main ways in which we've become more racially and ethnically diverse in the US, there's not more than 4 Jews. There's not more than 4 ways. It's plain and simple, honestly. One is immigration. There are Jews from India, there are Jews from Ethiopia, and they come to the US. 2 is adoption. 3 is interracial love. That's my story, right? And 4 is conversion. And we happen to have about 1 million American Jews of color. And they're mostly not showing up to organize Jewish spaces. But guess what? Most Jews are not showing up to organize Jewish spaces. So we have a lot of work to do on a lot of things. And it's definitely not just about Jews of color. It's definitely not. It's not just about whether there are Black Jews in our institutions and schools and synagogues. It's about the fact that largely our Jewish structures have to be reconsidered for a very diverse humanity looking for diversified needs. And that's all of us. It's all of us. But the conversation, how it's shifted, I would say the main shifts, I think there's a huge consciousness shift taking place right now where race is not an us-them topic for Jews, it's a we topic. It used to be race, racial justice, Black-Jewish relations. Black-Jewish, it's like, it's a dichotomy. It's 2 different groups. Yeah, what about me? Oh, you want me to talk to myself? Right? The dichotomies, all of that, we need to get rid of it, honestly, because it's not helpful to us because we're from all over the world. We're the Jewish people. We're like, come on, think about what we've accomplished and our legacies from all over the world. So if anything, we're actually living our legacies beautifully by reclaiming our multiracial, ethnic, cultural experiences. And guess what? No, there's no such thing as less or more Jewish. We don't like hierarchies. Rabbis aren't closer to God. It's not a thing in Judaism. We don't like hierarchies. We say that what do you mean? B'Tselem Elokim. That's like one of our bombshell ideas of Judaism, right? Is that we're created in the image of God. Like, right? And why? The rabbis are like, why? Like, why did we start there? Like, we could have started anywhere. Like, why does the Torah start there? So that you don't tell me 5,000 years later or whatever in 2021 or million, however many years you think later, that, oh, my ancestors are greater than your ancestors, right? And by the way, it took until about 20 years ago until we officially debunked race as a biological framework, right? Race isn't real. We know that, right? Just to confirm, there's no biological difference between me, you, or any person of any color skin except for pigmentation, facial features, but we've proven that we are 99.9% the same, right? And guess what? Only 20 years ago, it took a really long time. 150 years ago, there were people in our zip codes throughout this country that believed that Black people didn't come from Adam and Eve. Jews never believed that. Our tradition, what do you mean? We covered that 2,000 years ago in the Talmud. We already check, like, so what I want to encourage in just a brief few moments of this topic and conversation is that we have a lot of learning and relearning and unlearning and thinking to do. In our stories, it goes back to stories, because if you even think about American Jewish migration stories, the patterns, like in the early 1700s, there were not even 250 Jews in America. During the Civil War, there were 250,000 Jews. And we only start seeing dramatic jumps in the late 1800s, and people are coming from all over. We're already like not on the same page about what America is for us. We have very different versions. And so that's why American Jewry is as beautiful and rich with its mosaic and texture. But the conversation around race is one that I think is a part of this beautiful reckoning that's taking place, I think, in our society. So, L'chaim.
So you have one person who wants to either ask you a question or make a statement.
Please, 100%.
Stan.
Yeah. My question is not really a question, it's kind of a statement. We brought in Ethiopian Jews to Israel, and yet from what I've heard and read, most of them tend to be second-class citizens, and mainly partly because of education and a good part because of race. I mean, that seems to be a reality. Unfortunately, I mean, we have it in this country, from the time of the Civil War, Reconstruction was played as it was it really shouldn't have happened. And then they went to Jim Crow. So I'm not saying that our country is perfect, but I mean, Israel, if you're looking at it from a state and you're bringing in other Jews, it's just the race is different, but the religion is the same.
So thank you for that reflection. And by the way, the reason why the Jewish people, we are perfectly positioned for this discussion, unfortunately, right? Our suffering throughout history, what's in our genes and our blood, right? We know, come on. We know, trust me, we know, right? But the reality is that as we migrate and we adopt our host societies, who are Jews, what are the dominant voices of global Jewry today are voices that have adopted and adapted to Western thought and Western society. And if you really think about the founders also of the state of Israel, just, with all of the beauty of Israel, and I don't know your experience, I've been to Israel over 20 times. I mean, it's, Yerushalayim, it's the heartbeat of our people, but let's be really frank and honest. The founders of the state were European Jews, and Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews from the very beginning. Middle Eastern Jews had a very hard time, and there's a lot of historical truths about racial and ethnic discrimination and prejudice just within the founding of the country, let alone Ethiopian Jews. And the reality is racism, unfortunately, is not just about what I do or don't do. It's about structures, right? It's beyond it. Unfortunately, like, the reason why many feel so disempowered around conversations of race is because it's like toothpaste that you squeeze out of a toothpaste thing, you can't put it back in, right? it's in the air. It's structural in a way. It's affected people for hundreds of years, and the Western framework, I think, contributes to that in America and Israel. And with that said, it is different, right? There's similarities to that through the Western frame, but also different.
On the other hand, Jews who have been people who've been anti-Semitic for years, and you are dealing with the people who are aware of prejudices, and yet they pass that prejudice on to other people. I mean, it's not just the Jews. I mean, when the Irish came to this country, we had the same thing. When the Italians came to this country, we had the same thing. Everybody steps on the more recent people. I remember during the 60s when Puerto Rican people were coming into the United States. Well, actually, they were from the part of the United States anyway, but they were coming into the mainland part of the United States. And they were being called lazy, and they didn't work. They were coming here for welfare. And when I was doing work in the Virgin Islands, they were bringing people in from Puerto Rico because the people in Virgin Islands weren't good workers, but the people from Puerto Rico were. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer to this.
Have you heard of the book Caste?
Yeah,
anybody heard that book?
I haven't read it, but I know about it.
It's about the main, listen, you know, there's a bajillion books, you know, everyone's writing a book, and there's really great books out there. The only reason why I would recommend Caste above all else for the Jewish community in many respects is because what she does, number one, it's not so dense, like it's well read, written, but what she does is she talks about caste systems, which are basically hierarchical systems that exist. And she basically records that there's only 3 caste systems in human history that are integrated and still somewhat remembered in modern times. One is India, where you have the Brahmin, you have the untouchables, you have the, right? And then and I was in India. I remember like experiencing that with people that I met, where I was sitting down in a restaurant for coffee with, and I met a few people and they were close friends. And one of the friends couldn't come in the restaurant with us because they were a different caste. And I was like, wait, what? And it was like, this was in 2014. And I was like, wait, what? And they literally didn't flinch. It was just normal for them that one of the guys couldn't come in because he was a part of a caste where you weren't allowed to sit down at the table and eat with the Brahmin. And one of the people were a Brahmin. So she talks about caste in India. She talks about Jim Crow and America as a caste system. And then she talks also about Nazi Germany as a caste system. And those 3, and she talks and integrates and thinks about how they interweave with each other. We actually see just these really unfortunate striking parallels between anti-Semitism and racism, essentially through caste, and where Jews were positioned in a caste throughout Europe during the Middle Ages, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, as we know, and like the role of caste. You know, one other thing she brings, and the last thing I'll say here that's like really like breaks my heart, and I don't really know what to do with this, but it's very well documented that Hitler and the Third Reich learned their tactics from Jim Crow and American racism and slavery. And I don't know what you would say to that. I don't know what you would do with that. But what it does also bring to us is just how positioned the Jewish people are really in this conversation. And when we often are saying, well, you know, me, I'm just a white Jewish person, or I'm just like Polish, I come from a Jewish whatever. And like, however you throw away, like, I'm just like, we are essential to these conversations taking place in our generation. How we determine what our angle is and how we bring it to life, that takes time to figure out. But knowing that the Jewish people and what we've done until now. So anyway, caste kind of struck me for the reminders of parallels in societies and in the world, and what nations do what people do rather to preserve and gain power, like throughout time. And also, what does Judaism say to that? Right? What does the Torah say about human power? right? What is Jewish tradition? A lot. A lot. Like obsessed almost. We're almost obsessed, I would argue. Healthily obsessed, but we're obsessed, with these questions of, and equity, like what's, everybody's like equity, equality, equity, equity. What's equity? It's tzedakah. What's tzedakah? Giving charity. What's charity according to halacha? It's not giving somebody what you think they need. You don't fulfill your mitzvah.
Yeah, but the reality is some people are quote more equal than others. I mean, that's what it comes down to at this point.
Yes.
Unfortunately. And I'm not talking about monetarily. I'm not discussing somebody's finances at this point.
Yeah, I think you're also pointing to something that I wonder, like in any of our lifetimes, genuinely, like, will we see the end to hatred, to Amalek, to Haman, to Pharaoh, to racism, to anti-Semitism? Like, will we see the end? The idea.
Not at the UI than I do. You're much younger than I am.
No, I say our. I mean that. I mean, listen, like each of us, like, listen, we bridge differently in terms of the importance of both of our age brackets in this discussion also is super real. I'll tell you, like, I don't know, I already struggle with like my relationship to age. I'm a little thrown off because I feel really old and really young. And then I spent 2 years working in hospice care as a social work intern and rabbinic intern. And those 2 years, I don't know, age is just such a weird thing. And we all have a weird relationship to it. We can't escape it, but it's like, that's another topic of entry. But I would say that, there is a lot to say on like, will I see the world perfected in my lifetime, in your lifetime, in our children, grandchildren and children and great-grandchildren's lifetime? You know what Judaism says to that? I don't really know. But I'm still gonna work on it. I'm gonna still try my best. Like, this idea of tikkun olam, I mean, I know it's become like pop culture, fix the world, and also hopefully deep, meaningful impact and change. But the idea of tikkun olam in a real way, it's like, come on, am I really gonna see the world peace, poverty? Yeah, in my lifetime? I hope so. And even if I don't though, I'm still going to work towards it. Right? Martin Buber says this about a chassid. He says a chassid is somebody who works to try to perfect the world, even though they know in their lifetime they may not see the world perfected. And like, will we get rid of Haman and Amalek? I don't know. I mean, these forces of evil that are like natural like they're in the world, they're radioactive, they're pulsing, they're alive, and they come and rise up in every generation. And we fight back for love and justice and unity and the good stuff, like that fight, like that's, where do you think Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and I mean, all of these things are these forces of the fight of, a constant, like
good and evil. But some of the evil is not as evil and some of the good is not as good.
Yes. That moral compass also of, the name Yisrael in the Torah, the rabbis say, the Torah says itself, but the rabbis continue. The Torah says, Kisarita Elokim v'amishim v'tuchal, that why was Jacob renamed as Yisrael? Because he struggled with the physical and the spiritual. I don't know. I don't think I don't think the physical is bad. So it's not exactly the same analogy of good and evil, but it's also saying that we struggle. We know how to struggle. We know how to hold paradox. That's one of our muscles, apparently, as a nation, as a global community. But wow. It's like, and it really goes back to our Parsha also. This week's Parsha it's not so into cancel culture, I'll tell you that much. It's not. I don't know, do we have to rectify the wrongs? Yes, but what this week's Parsha shows us is that God was ready to like, goodbye everyone, this is it, starting over. And what do we learn, right? The Torah doesn't spill ink, right? It's not extra. What do we learn is that I don't know what the golden calf will look like in your generation. I don't know, for us, it might be racism and hatred and tribalism and identity politics and culture wars and all those things of the I, me, right? And but in every generation, there's some sort of force where you just think it's like, no, I just got to give up on that. Just got to call quits. And this week's Parsha, right? Kisisa is about that. Like it really, we read this Torah portion not just as a backdrop of Yom Kippur, it's also the Torah portion of fast days, days of reflection and change. We read these and we say, remember, we say these words. In this week's Torah portion, I think Moshe, when he starts playing poker with God and negotiating a contract, a deal, a new covenant, a start over, a repeat, in that context, Moshe says, you have to remember this whole story. Like, do you not remember what we just did? Like, do you not remember what our ancestors did? Like, do you not God, remember what the story is. So I think that's hopefully something we could bring to our generation around these discussions, is that it goes deeper than just than even our lifetimes, right? It is a lot for us to reflect on. So wow.
Yes. It's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot there. And then
Thank
again,
you.
like around, just the last thing I'll say, like, what are we trying to do for our generation? Honestly, like more than anything, to create as many access points into community for our, that's it. Like, to create as many access points to community. Like, it's not a one size fits all. And we should meet people where they are. And we should also root it in tradition from where they are. That's, to me, how I feel. Like, there's so many ways to connect Jews to Judaism, and it doesn't, we should lift that up. We should try to create that kind of experience where we could all see ourselves reflected, Yeah. So l'chaim.
Thank you. Have a great Shabbos, and thank you so much for today.